You are listening to Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. Pursuing the RPG hobby with reckless abandon.
Well, hello. Welcome to Season 28, Episode 6 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu, and we forgot to come up with the order that people would introduce.
We did. We always do that every week.
My name is Bill.
My name is Kimmy.
My name is Mo.
I'm Stork.
We have Full House.
Yeah, this is the most we've had on the cast in a long time.
Yeah, remember when we used to have 7 people, and the episodes would last 2.5 hours, and we couldn't remember the last hour of them?
Or like 3 or
Yeah, what was
3.5 hours.
Yeah.
What was the record? 3.5 hours?
I think so.
3 and 3 plus. Yeah. Cool. So, congratulations, Mo, on your Kickstarter. I've been reading.
Yay!
I've been reading through my book. I'm enjoying
Me?
it. Yeah.
Oh,
I got
thanks.
my book.
That was a long time ago. You got time
I
now.
guess it was. I guess it was a long time ago, wasn't it?
It's so long Mo forgot he had a Kickstarter. Did you hear him?
It was.
Like, what? Did I have a Kickstarter? Oh, you're right.
But the shipping is more recent, like having the book shipped and stuff.
Yeah, I've so recovered from that stress.
I'm not, so I'm happy for you.
She's like, I haven't.
No, I'm still emailing frantically with factories in China about cards, but everything's good. It's fine.
I know that story. Well, thanks. I'm glad you're digging it, man.
Yeah, it's cool.
It's very good.
All right. In this episode of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast, Dave in DC writes in about GM inspiration, and Andreas writes in about artificial gravity, bears, and other stuff. But first, if you'd like to email us, you can email us at happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. That's happyjacksrpg@gmail.com. If you'd like to find us on the social medias, go to happyjacksrpg. happyjacksrpg, all one word, on most of them. All the big ones. And that's it. Who would like to read the first email, or should I read the first email? I will read the first email. Emails are a little long. We can
I
split
can
them
do
up.
it, or I can do
You can
half.
almost like break them up. They're like marathons.
They're big. They're big emails. You want to split them up?
Yeah, why don't you start Mo and tag in someone, like unexpectedly, to make sure we're all paying attention.
Ooh, that's a good idea.
Exactly.
Yes.
Look alive.
Can you tell
Wow.
I've been teaching online for like a year now?
Let's say someone in the room is a teacher.
That's like playing Bunny 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 at pre-fair.
Bunny, go!
All right. So,
For
dear
those of you who
Happy...
don't know, Bunny 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 is an improv game for actors that like gets you to pay attention. Bunny 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 Bunny. You like pass it around the circles. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead. Sorry, Mo. There you go.
Dear Happy Jack's crew, Dave in DC here. I hope this finds you all well and healthy. I wanted to discuss some ideas on where GMs can get ideas and inspirations for their games. I'm a firm believer in borrowing ideas and individual elements from a variety of sources, comics, TVs, movies, films, real life, and filing the serial numbers off and using these in my games. However, I think a mistake that many GMs make is when trying this is that they tend to borrow from ideas or stories which they believe are the best, so to speak, and don't change them enough, with the result being a game that is too recognizable and its source material and often railroad in nature. A stereotypical example is the new DM running their first D&D campaign and having the group set off to destroy an evil wizard's ring by throwing it in the volcano it was forged in. Yes, Lord of the Rings is a classic fantasy story, but I think players catch on to it really quickly. Often the new GM uses an idea and doesn't change it up enough to make it surprising for their players. Kimmy.
Several years ago, almost failed. I was like reading ahead.
Good idea there, Kimmy.
Yeah, it was such a good idea. Several years ago, I played in a game at Origins Game Fair, where the GM did an excellent job of borrowing a plot idea, changing it up, and giving everyone a fun experience. The game was Star Trek, woohoo, and set in the Next Generation era, using a generic game system, not one of the Star Trek specific rule sets. The game involved a rescue mission at a small research station which was threatened by severe electromagnetic thunderstorms, as well as a rival away team of Romulans. Unfortunately, ultimately, the players discovered that severe thunderstorms were caused by Thor, the Norse god, who was angered that the Dark Elves, the Romulans, had disturbed his slumber. Stop editing it while I'm reading it.
You already read it. I was fixing that. I changed it to be what you read, so you just say you read it correctly later. I'm fixing it behind you.
The game, the GM admitted he had simply taken the idea from the original Star Trek episode. Oh yes, he did. Who mourns for Adonis? There was where the crew has discovered the Greek god Apollo and mashed it together with dark elf tropes from the second MCU Thor movie. I think it's clear that the Apollo Star Trek episode and the second MCU Thor movie are far from the best that either franchise has to offer. Yet, mashed together, those two mediocre stories made for Stork.
A very rather enjoyable RPG one-shot. I personally found this simple twist to the original story to be fun enough that when friends asked me to run some RPG sessions over Zoom during our pandemic lockdowns, I decided on a Star Trek game using the Lasers and Feelings rule set for ease of play. And the initial story was this Thor story, borrowed from my convention experience a few years ago. Also, I think new GMs tend to borrow concepts wholesale, looking to use entire plot or storylines when I think it is perfectly fine to just borrow elements as needed. For example, one of my prior Savage World / Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. convention games had the characters investigating the disappearance of a former agent who had some superpowers. At one point, they went to the missing agent's apartment to investigate. The characters knew that there was an undercover agent living in the apartment across the hall to keep tabs on the former agent. This is a very common story element in many spy shows and movies. It was even used in Captain America, the Winter Soldier. Steve's neighbor, who he believed was a nurse, was in fact Agent 13, Sharon Carter. When the players got to the apartment building, there was a dead undercover agent, and Hydra agents were ransacking both apartments. Combat ensued, and the battle mat had the floor plan of both apartments across the hall from one another. It wasn't until after the fight was over that one of my players looked closely at the map and asked, "Did we just have our fight in Penny and Leonard and Sheldon's apartments?" Yes, I borrowed the floor plan from the apartments from The Big Bang Theory, but the apartments from Friends would have worked too if I hadn't been watching that show at the time. Bill!
Any of my convention games can often have up to a dozen elements borrowed from many sources to come up with things that from the core plot to floor plans, to NPCs or individual clues or even props. While sitting around channel surfing during our collective pandemic isolation, I realized that inspiration for any number of procedurals or crime mystery games is sitting right on basic cable. There are endless repeats of crime procedurals on the air. Just DVR a few, break out a notepad, and get ready to file off the serial numbers. I think any 1 hour episode will easily give you the material for a 4-hour game session. All the names, clues, relationships of the victims, perpetrators, and red herrings are all there on the screen. Need straight crime mysteries? Law & Order and NCIS are great to use. Need more of an espionage bent? The new Hawaii Five-0 or NCIS Los Angeles are probably your best bets. I would say Law & Order SVU may be better to avoid, as the subject matter of sex crimes and crimes against children strays heavily into the X-card territory for some players. But Criminal Minds, although it primarily is dealing with serial killers, may be very adaptable for darker games. Maybe the serial killers are Cthulhu cultists. Anyway, just some ideas that inspiration for GMs can come from a variety of places, and it is often better to grab a few smaller elements and mash them together. Have a drink and keep up the gaming. Dave in DC.
Thank you.
I totally agree with this, and have done it myself. In fact, Dave and I think the last convention we did together, the GM together, I did Mission Impossible. And I stole a plot from the original Mission Impossible series and imported it wholesale into D&D. And like he said, by the time you're done fiddling it and moving it into fantasy and all of that, you can't recognize the plot. Mm-hmm. And it worked great. And a lot of the sort of work was sort of done for me. It's like, here's the beginning, the middle, and end. Here are some of the clues you need. All right, cool. My work is done. My work here is done. I just need to sort of come up with some NPCs and find a map.
I think the big problem a lot of people have is they try to run the exact same story. And I think at best you can get people started, and you really then have to play to find out. I think you can use these tropes to get your players spun up And as soon as they're excited and having fun, you kind of just sit back and, see how they resolve the problem. And if they pick the wrong killer, if that's funner, then that's it.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be like Clue, where you have multiple endings.
Oh yeah. I remember we got a review copy of a of a murder mystery where intentionally in the adventure this guy wrote, he didn't say who the murderer was. It could have been any number of people, and he just said, "This is how this person would have done it. This is how this person would have done it, etc." So he gave you how they would have done it, or at what point they would have killed the person. But it's up to you to pick who it is. I think I think the one of the things that he didn't specifically say, but he was kind of implying is don't worry about genre, because the story itself doesn't it depends, but in a lot of cases the story doesn't rely on anything about the genre that it's in. And because when I ran my college GURPS fantasy game, I was at home Saturday watching TV, and it's like Saturday afternoon television is a wasteland of old reruns, and it was like Rockford Files or
Rockford Files is the best. Don't you be slamming Rockford Files, man.
Or Columbo. I don't remember which one it was. What's the one where the guy used to walk away and go, "Oh, another thing." Columbo. It might have been Columbo. I don't know. But I was watching an episode of that, and it was just a typical murder mystery thing, and I'm like, oh, I didn't expect it to be that guy. And I'm like, okay, that's what I'm going to use. And then the next Friday, I ran a murder mystery, and that was I basically just changed all the names and changed who the characters were and ran it that way. And no one was the wiser. The more you change it and the more disparate the genre is from the material you're stealing, the harder it's going to be for people to notice. You could probably lift the whole exact Star Wars series or the first Star Wars film and put it in an entirely different genre, and no one would probably figure it out.
It's not like this is an unknown thing. It's
right.
I mean, Seven Samurai and
the Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, the Magnificent Seven are the exact same movie. How many times have we seen Romeo and Juliet in one form or another? It happens all the time. And
Ron is King Lear. Is it King Lear?
King Lear.
Yeah.
So I like those Emmy award-winning RPG scenes.
Well, it's really funny, right? Because if you look at where getting inspiration from things, so if you watch The Mandalorian, right, season 2, episode 1 is a mission from Knights of the Old Republic.
Oh, is it really?
It is, because there's a quest in KOTOR where Revan, who's the hero player, is on Tatooine in the Dune Sea, luring out a crate dragon with banthas and then blowing it up with mines. And the reward is a crate dragon pearl. It's exactly the episode. They just were like, "Oh, hey, that's really..." And that's the thing. When you watch Mandalorian, the one reason it kind of works as this space western episodic thing is because it just feels like an RPG, right? He's like, "What's your main quest?" Well, I have to, I have this child. I have to return the child. Then it's like all side quest. Takes him like 13 episodes, or 8 episodes or something to do something he could have done in one, because he's just constantly side questing, And it just they grab that inspiration. So that's another interesting place to grab inspiration for your tabletop RPG is from video games too.
Yeah.
Well, and
do you speak Bantha? Do you speak Bantha? Yes, I do. I do speak Bantha. It's right here on my sheet.
That whole premise for Mandalorian is actually lifted whole cloth from a manga called Lone Wolf and Cub, where it's a sort of samurai wandering with his kid.
Yeah.
So, again, these inspirations are just, everybody borrows from everybody else. And, now that we're bringing it up, you can start thinking like, oh, yeah, it was. Oh, my God. I don't think there's, what is that old quote, pros steal or amateurs borrow and pros steal or something like that?
I think that's it. Yeah.
I think too, other than just taking ideas, there's been a bunch of games that I've run where I saved so much prep time by stealing stuff that really existed, like he was talking about the maps. Like there's a ton of con games and stuff where I've run in schools or office buildings and things like that. All that stuff is on the internet. You can get amazing maps and just download them and like MS Paint like over the names and like or if you really want to just like white out over the names after you print them or whatever you want. Whiteout is a thing for people who like write with pens, by the way. They're really stupid young.
That's ancient technology now.
Yeah. So I've done that so many times, and you can get perfect little ones, and it's just fantastic, and it saves you tons of time and effort. They're free usually, other than like printing them out for when we used to game in person, and it's just fantastic. So all those little knickknacks and accessories and stuff like that you're adding to your game, props, some of them, like they're out there somewhere. Just grab them and bring them in, rather than spending that much more time on prep if that's not your jam, and then you can put more time into stealing ideas for your like story.
I have a whole folder full of repurposed maps that I have acquired from various places all over the place. And every time I have come with a game, I go through it and find, there's a floor plan. And maybe it's a school and now turns into an office building or whatever. All those resources are out there. If you just, if you get hung up on the fact that I've got to be original, gosh, I've got to come up with all my own stuff, you're going to drive yourself crazy.
One of the things that I've been finding myself doing more and more, when the party goes to a location, some kind of place, I try to think of a shut up, dog. I try to think of a place that would serve a similar purpose that I've actually been to and know of, and I just describe that place and just slightly modify for genre appropriateness. But like the strip mall by my house where the Vallarta grocery store is, I've used almost every one of those storefronts that I've been in. I haven't been in the Sally Ann's, but the other ones I've used them.
You don't go to Sally's, Stu?
No, I don't. They don't have.
Where do you get your hair supplies?
I've been there a bunch of times.
Have you? Okay, then you could use that one, and I wouldn't even know.
Yeah.
But I think I caught you the other day, Stu, on the last vampire game we were in, giving me. We were driving somewhere, and it was the route you take to work.
Oh, it might have been. It might.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? It was because it was right off Valley Boulevard, just north of the 710 freeway.
Yeah.
Because I pass by there every day.
Just doing stuff that and it makes sense. I think at one point I was running a game and I described my childhood home when they had to enter like an apartment or something, and I just because I knew it in my head, like what's on the left and what's on the right. Yeah, it's easier. It's a shortcut.
Yeah, I did a lot of inspirational research / stealing for getting ready for the Traveler campaign I just started running, and a lot of that was just like I just want to look at deck plans and like sci-fi floor plans and things like that, and I would see something, I'm like, oh, that looks really cool, that has to be a thing, and it goes in a different folder, like even if I don't know what it is yet, right? It's like, oh, I like that layout, or I like the way that looks,
just like your background.
Yeah, just like my background, right? There was like, hey, I just need to find something that looks like it's the inside of a space station. Oh, there we go. And even when I was thinking about what the station would look like, because Yuma Station is going to be a big central part of it, I just started looking at different images, and that then sparked like, oh, I want it to be like this. This is how I want the layout to be. But I think also part of that is then being open enough to when your players start filling in details, you've got room for them.
Yeah.
Right? Not being so just like pedantically married to like, no, but my thing only has 9 decks or whatever it is. Like, oh no, if they want to go to deck 13, but there's a great story reason, but I guess there's 13 decks now.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what Mo was saying. Yeah. It's a good point, because if you're completely a slave to the source material, and it's even mentioned in the email, you're going to end up railroading. You're not allowing anybody any freedom or any fun, and for the story to move organically. So many times it's okay. I think it's better to maybe take some concepts wholesale. Like I'm still sitting on an idea that I want to use in D&D or some sort of fantasy thing that's sort of a mashup between like Harry Potter and the X-Men. And by those two worlds being combined into one, I'm using that as sort of, I don't know, some of the rules of X-Men and some of the stuff that happens in X-Men, as well as sort of the fantasy of Harry Potter. It could be a lot of fun, but I'm not being complete and total slave to a particular X-Men storyline.
Mm-hmm.
Just using it as a general sort of background, sort of that informs the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's really funny because you're talking about Harry Potter. I was reading a bunch of Harry Potter like thought process things, and one of them was concerning how people changed when they were near a Horcrux. And I was like, oh, that's such a smart little thing you could totally steal from Harry Potter, which is when you're near something, you're influenced by it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that becomes a clue that people are like, oh, how come this character always, is a jerk or whatever, when we're in this certain place, and let them kind of start figuring out what that is without it having to be the same story mechanic.
Everyone roll perception to see why John's acting so strange.
Because it's John. But I think there's so many, even just like a small, like huge in the story there, but a small element really, right? Mm-hmm. Of proximity to specific items has an action to the character. Right? Like, oh man, that could just float into so many different things. And it doesn't have to be, an original thought. To me, the big originality comes in what you do with it after you get it.
Yep.
I fell down the rabbit hole in college of realizing that most everything actually comes from a story in the Bible. So like Robin Hood is the story of David before he's king, running from like this guy who's a king, but like a bad guy. Mm-hmm. And, Noah was the first prepper. So.
Does anyone have a favorite thing they like to steal story ideas from before we move to the second topic?
I've stolen from a lot of different sources, but it tends to be pretty much pop culture and media. Like I said, I stole directly from the Mission Impossible storyline, which harkens to the email. Like he said, there's so many great sources on television for murder mysteries in anything that you can completely. Even the premise of Rockford Files would make a great Savage Worlds game. Just the idea of like you guys are all down and you're like detectives, and you get hired for some weird mystery. Go
right.
Mm-hmm.
I think I like to always find something that's in a completely different genre and grab something from that.
Yeah.
Right. So like I wanted to run Traveler, but I'm like, I don't want to run super high tech Traveler, and I don't want to run Star Wars. I'm like, oh, I'm going to run a space western, which is its own genre anyway. But now I can pull from those tropes, and they make sense. And I've done that too in like having modern day stuff and grabbing fantasy stuff, right? Like I like to grab from different genres. Because then it doesn't have to be a specific story, or it can just be an element, right? Whether that's like that was, Sue, if you remember when we used to live together, back in the days when we lived together. I had that post-apocalyptic setting that was in Utah.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
So it was like near future, Mormons were survivalists, whole thing, but there was magic, right? Like that was a real thing. And that was the reaching over to the fantasy thing and saying, I just want there to be magic. And then it lets you just do all kinds of interesting stuff that nobody expects.
I think for me, mostly TV and comic books. So like definitely a majority comic books. If it's just ideas for characters a lot, like especially like NPCs, I generally grab comic book characters and I just like reskin them a little bit. But I'm sure you're all shocked that Wonder Woman appears a lot in my games. It's very on brand.
I've never run into Wonder Woman in any of your games.
No strong female characters or strong non-male
No,
characters.
that's true. Okay.
Do you have a favorite, Mo?
Yeah, I just kind of steal willy-nilly.
Mm-hmm.
Like games, comic books, old TV. Like I like subverting expectations, and so like for me, I like to start with something that looks very mundane, and then kind of expose that things aren't as they seem. So for me, I'm just always looking to subvert expectations.
Right.
And it's always funny how you can start somewhere. Like you say, I'm just going to borrow this trope, and then it changes. Like when I first started with the whole freak show thing that I did all those years ago at the cons, Savage Worlds, I really started out wanting to run Big Trouble in Little China. but I couldn't figure out a way to make a bunch of people fit because really it's about Jack, you know? And then one thing led to another, and the next thing you know, I ended up with Freak Show. But it really came out of me trying to run Big Trouble in Little China or a version of it, something like that. And I think, Bill, you once tried to do Warehouse 13 as a... Yeah,
at cons, I ran...
that's what that was based on.
Yeah, I ran Fact, which was which basically was set in World War II, was the setting, and you were all agents, and it was totally like a Warehouse 13 rip, because every session I ran, every one shot, was you going to try and get an artifact and bring it back. So yeah, it was that combination of like the huge warehouse at the end of Indiana Jones and Warehouse 13.
Now, was it
Erica?
Warehouse 13? There was another show that was kind of like that.
Friday the 13th.
There was
Friday the 13th. That's it.
Yeah, that was great.
There was also the Librarians.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that's right.
It's a very similar plot. Like, I just love the idea that, all right, now everything's lost. You got to go find it, and all the lost stuff is dangerous.
Right.
Yeah, Friday the 13th was like, the movies were like okay, because I'm not a massive like horror movie fan, but man, that series was super cool. Yeah. Like that had some great ideas in it. And also, I've been watching Eureka, which is fantastic because I never watched it before, and so that's been like Kimmy did the whole Star Trek thing. Like I never want to see these. I want to watch all these. So I've been watching. What show did I never see? And Eureka is great, and I did not know it was the same universe as Warehouse 13.
Yeah.
No
because
shit.
I'm watching like season 3 or something, and then it's like, wait a minute, why do I recognize this character? And it's like, oh, because they're from Warehouse 13, and they reference it, and I'm like, God damn it!
Shut the
Also,
front door.
Watch that again.
There's also a crossover with another show, I think, at some point, and I've forgotten what it is. But yeah, there's like 3 worlds that converge in that show. It's weird. Very meta.
Yeah.
What about you, Stu?
Oh, yeah.
No, I was going to say, Kimmy, what did Erica Odd say?
Erica Odd said, "For me, I repurpose adventures and such from other games. I've run a D&D adventure in Star Wars Saga Edition, etc." Always good plan.
I like the idea, and I steal from other people when they're talking about what they steal from. But when Stork mentioned Mission Impossible, the old TV series, not the series of films where people are constantly running on top of rooftops, that would be a fantastic source to use to have like just a total mindfuck on the party. Have them be the target of one of those Mission Impossible scams that they do.
Nice.
People who aren't familiar with the show, basically they're the MI, what is it? Are they a team or a force? I don't remember.
The IM Force, Impossible Missions Force.
And they basically come up with these brilliant scams where they're masters of disguise, and they create false rooms, and they go in and just completely construct an entire reality and then have their mark go through it to do whatever it is they're going to do by the end of the episode. And
they were inceptioning people before Inception.
Yeah, they were.
It was a total psyops team, and I mean, really they ended up gaslighting the entire mark, the whole thing, and the whole idea was if they were found out, if anybody realized that what they were, they would be completely disavowed, and the game was up, and they would show up, and then they would just disappear again. It was very cool.
The thing I loved about the premise too was that basically whoever was running the op, right, would have these file folders and would go through them and was choosing people for particular skills or abilities because they had the whole like scam in their head already. Right. And they were like, I need someone who could do this. I need someone who can do this. Right. And they had like very specific components to play, which is brilliantly similar to if I'm trying to plan something for my party and I'm like, I want to make sure everybody has a spotlight moment.
Right.
Right. I want to construct something that takes each of them into account. That's very much how that series was built.
Come on, now that you're bringing it up, doesn't it remind you of, say, Ocean's 11? Ocean's 12?
Oh, yeah.
Or even Lieutenant Nikita?
It came out during that whole Pulp series. I don't know if you read the Richard Stark novels, but or Donald Westlake, but you could buy these books for $1 each, and they had the most circuitous, plots in them.
Love it.
But I like Mission Impossible because killing people isn't an option.
Never.
Right.
It undermines the success. So it's like you really have to think, and for some gamers, they like that. And some gamers, it'll constrain them and make them be creative.
Well, that's what we did with the Mission Imbartable. It's there was one guy at the table who realized that they weren't going to be able to kill anybody, and he said, "I have to kill someone," and so he did. On their way out the door, he shanked somebody. But that was the whole thing. Like, you get in and you get out, and nobody's supposed to know you were even ever there.
Yeah, I'd love to either. That's a great idea. Is to like have them be the target of that, and then like them figure it afterwards. Like Leverage is another great series. That did that, right? Just like, or even if you want to get real pulpy, A-Team, right? To come in and like, here's a problem to solve.
They weren't very subtle. There were explosions everywhere. It's more like the Tom Cruise.
When you have chrome M16s, you are not subtle.
Mr. T.
Here's the thing. If they're going to be the target of an Inception or a Mission Impossible, what is their plot? Because the players have to have a thing that they're trying to do while they're being undermined.
Right. Well, it seems like you could look at kind of like what one of their big goals is. There's something they're trying to find or achieve, whatever it is. And then your BBEG, or someone's like, I'm going to get something out of them because I know I can walk them down a garden path. They're going to be more likely to fall into my manipulations because ultimately they want to get the foozle. And then at the end, not only do they not get the foozle, but their main enemy has gotten a bunch of information from them or whatever it is, right?
Yeah, they show up at the castle and it turns out it was just a rented warehouse and it's empty now. And they were like, "What? There was a prince here last week. What?"
Yeah, because to me, it's also what are they trying to get from the party if you're doing it that way, right? Like what's the operation against them trying to merit? Figuring out what the players want is almost easier. It's more like what would I want to get from the players that they wouldn't want me to have and be really upset if I got it.
Right.
4D GMing.
Another great example is the movie The Sting. Where they set up an entire operation to gaslight one dude.
Mm-hmm. All right. Thank you, Dave and DC, for the email. The next email, artificial gravity, bears, and other stuff from Andreas. I will start this, and then I will randomly pick someone to continue reading it.
Oh no! What have we started?
What have you? I'm blaming you, Kimmy.
It's fine. It's okay.
Hi, Kurt and crew. It was a sad day. Andreas. Wait. Is this not from Andreas? Did I write the wrong?
It is.
It's
very meta.
Because I've done that before. Maybe he's making fun of me for confusing them. Has kicked the bucket, and that bear in the woods was to blame. But as we all know, there's a surplus of Kurt in Happy Jack's community, so a new Kurt stepped forward. We have a lot of Kurts. A few episodes ago, Stu Kurt talked about artificial gravity and how it would not surprise him if it was indeed invented for Star Trek, as they could not afford to film people on wires all the time. Now, it turns out that trope is older than that. H.G. Wells, in his stories, had a material with a negative gravitational force which could be used as plating to provide anti-gravity to crafts.
That's awesome.
That's 19th century, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In science fiction stories, in books and magazines from the 1930s, it's actually not uncommon with belts and boots that confer anti-gravitational effects to their wearers, and that is the common way for the trope for a long time. But if you want to really bring it into the form of TV and film, there's also a German TV series, Rampatrouille Orion. Did that sound like a German accent when I said it?
No. I mean, yes. Yeah.
Okay. And there's a link.
A German Shepherd.
Which premiered which premiered at the same time as Star Trek. Maybe it was something about the 60s. Probably
9 days afterwards. I went and researched this
Really?
after reading this. It's crazy. Star Trek, right? The original Star Trek, 1966, came out on September 8th. And then on September 17th, this Rampatrouille, whatever it is.
Rampatrouille Orion.
Rampatrouille. Die Faschistinnen Abenteuer des Raumfahrten Orion, which means Space Patrol, the fantastic ventures of the spaceship Orion. That's the translation of it.
Okay.
And I went and watched the first damn episode on YouTube, too.
Wow.
Oh, no kidding.
It is fascinating because all of my personal mentality around sci-fi of the 60s is Star Trek.
Right.
And you watch this and it's like, oh, this is all European design. Everything's rounded edges as opposed to like sliders, which was the very Star Trek-y thing.
Right.
They have these like long, like the shafts with chrome, like gear shift balls, and there's like 7 of them sticking up, and they're like really fun. It's like crazy. And they actually, to get super nerdy for just a second, and I apologize, but
you're on a nerd podcast and you're apologizing for being nerdy.
No, this is like hyper nerdy, right? Because the whole thing's shot in black and white, which makes it a little different. But then there's an underwater casino and a spaceport where they're shot using the Schufthahn process. And that is the way they filmed the film Metropolis, which was a very specifically a German way of filming, where they use mirrors to basically overlay a big image into another scene. So in the underwater casino scene, which by the way has amazing social dancing from their version of the future, it is
Okay, I gotta
incredible.
watch this now.
You've got to watch it. It's ridiculous. They're there, and then where it looks like the glass would be, it looks like they just took like film footage of like fish in a big fish tank, because there's these supposedly giant fish that are just like betas and stuff like swimming up there. And it's so fascinating to see how they solved all those problems of putting on a TV show about the far future in 1966 compared to Star Trek. And it's just like, I was like just captivated. It's like, oh my God. And their choices for uniforms and haircuts and all that kind of stuff.
That's amazing.
Just my glasses.
In
now.
black
Sorry.
and black and white. So, for something completely different, Kimmy.
I'm sorry. I was looking at the YouTube page. This isn't fair.
Got you.
You guys are YouTube. I'll read
something
it.
about the 60s.
Okay.
You said, was that where you ended? Why am I the
love
worst
the
one
way-
at this?
I love the way Tappy. That's where you start.
Oh, I love the way Tappy Kurt is thinking about his game's idea, where the mechanics are fun in itself and the thespian improv is not the point. I think we sometimes get way too focused on that part, and it is often considered a more advanced way to play, or even adult for that matter. There is a great conversation going on right now, and as John Peterson has released his book, The Elusive Shift, on how these two cultures developed, and as seeing RPGs as theater or game. It's clearly a divide that has been there from the start, and I think it should we should emphasize more the diversity in what an RPG can be. I'd love to see Tappy Kurt take this idea on and create something playable. I applaud the effort. If that was more exposition than food for thought, here's a direct question for you. I am a huge fan of Western movies. I love that setting for RPG adventures, but just like some other historical settings, there's baggage. It's impossible to ignore the fact that the myth of the West is built on murder and exploitation of the First Nations peoples, and few games, if any, approach that fact. So how would you take on that issue? Just don't play in the Old West at all? Focus your game on those murdered people instead? Have a serious talk before the game and then move on? Something else? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that one. I have my own approach, but it's not free from issues either. As that was a topic that can make you sad, take a drink. Kurt may take water if he wants, and the other Kurt can take a drink. Can drink a Diet Coke. Does not have to be beer. Now, I wonder why there haven't been songs at the end of the episodes for some time. I miss the days of yore where I wanted to see what songs Stu Kurt had picked for that episode. Take care, everyone. Kurt of Sweden, artist formerly known as Andreas.
I answered that very quickly because it causes issues with YouTube, because all that music is licensed, and even though some of it
You own the license.
Even though you
I'm
own the
licensed for it,
You get
it still
dinged for
causes
doing
problems. So that's why.
But all those songs are available if you want to listen to them.
Pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, go find them.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? Like that whole thing right now. I told Kimmy, I said, I want to have a theme song for my Traveler game for Yuma Station. So I went out and licensed something specifically. I told Kimmy, like, oh, I'm going to give you a copy of the license, and I'll have a copy of the license. And then if anybody complains, we can show that we actually licensed the music.
Yeah.
Right? But that's a stupid problem right now, where it doesn't even matter if it's your song.
And the problem is now is there are people who are squatting on stuff they don't have the rights to. I had that happen with a music video I made, just kind of experimenting, and I used a clip that I knew for a fact, because I got it off of Wikimedia, it was old enough to be out of copyright. It was in public domain, and I used a couple of like little bits of the scene interspliced with other stuff, and some guy said, "Oh, I own the copyright to that," and I fought it, and I was able to get them to release it, so this guy wasn't getting ad revenue for the stupid video I did. But it took me, it was probably an hour-long process to do that, because I had to go back, find where I found it originally, send them links to it, saying this is what the guy said he got. But there's people out there who are doing that, and just, I don't know if they're making any money at it or not, but fuck them.
Maybe we should add a page to the website that has links to all the songs.
Oh, yeah. You could do that.
Because they're talking in chat about where can they find You Cannot Be a Ninja. And I don't think you have that.
I haven't. It's not finished. I have to finish that opus. It's not done. I only did.
Artist is not done.
Yeah, I haven't gotten to the best part yet. I haven't even gotten to the denouement.
Can I take a swing at the main question that we read a minute ago? Yes. Okay. So this is something that's kind of been batted around right now, and it's something that's ever evolving in the RPG scene right now. I've been looking into it a lot as someone who's starting to write games more, and I actually just went through the process of, I was writing a game about mystical creatures from around the world, and I talked with a lot of cultural sensitivity consultants and things like that. I decided to change the nature of that game because of the information I was given. The biggest thing is you need to kind of decide, like, the way I would approach it. If you really want to play something that's in the Old West, up front, talk to your group. There absolutely has to be a conversation. Absolutely, 100%. And what most people tend to do is say, hey, the Old West is super problematic. There's a lot of issues there. We want to play in elements of the Old West, but we don't want to include this part of it. Not in a way to erase, like, we absolutely acknowledge the awful things that happened, but simply because we don't want to inflict more harm or gamify the pain of the people of the past. There are some people who don't agree with that. There are some people who say, no, like, you just shouldn't play in that type of game at all. Like, there is, that's kind of wiping the troubles of the past away. And there are people who do take issue with that too. So it takes multiple conversations. Talk first with your players about what they're comfortable with. There's a lot of, if you look online, there's a lot of forms you can fill out, like Google forms you can fill out pre-game to find out what people's comfort level is anonymously. So they fill out a Google form, you get the data on the back end saying, 3 people out of 5 people said they were not comfortable with just wiping the slate clean. Maybe we should find a different setting for this game. Things like that. So that's the first thing. But you absolutely have to acknowledge that it happened. Just being like, we're playing in this setting, but we're just not going to do any of that. Like, isn't enough. Like, you have to really realize that is a part that is kind of an inextricable link from the Old West, and you have to figure out as a group how you're going to acknowledge that. Are you going to write in the railroads? Okay, well, those railroads were built in really problematic ways, and a lot of people were seriously harmed by it. That's not even getting into the First Nations and things like that, and that happens with a lot of historical settings. And I say that like we're a group of people who really loves history. We're most of us Ren Fair nerds, stuff like that. So we like playing in those types of historical settings. So yeah, you definitely have to acknowledge it. I'm sort of babbling on. If you look at games written by people of color, indigenous peoples, things like that, actually Coyote and Crow is a game that's kickstarting right now. Absolutely fantastic. It's not a historical setting, but it's a uncolonized future that comes from First Nations people. It's written by First Nations people. And they have a whole section that they've kind of written and made public saying, because people are like, hey, this is a fantastic game, I want to support it, but I feel a little weird running it since I'm not an Indigenous person. So they have a whole section of how to handle it and how they've handled it with that game. So definitely look towards games like that have a section written by the people who are hurt by colonization about how to do it appropriately, because and adapt that into gameplay no matter what system you're running. That's a really important step there, is to kind of listen to those people who are harmed and really kind of adapt from their words what is appropriate. Sorry, that was a rant.
I just I feel bad because I'm going to recommend another game that is not out yet, Haunted West by Chris Spivey. Kind of sought to do a lot of the similar stuff, and just feel free to I like what Haunted West is doing, because it's the idea that those people who were killed and mistreated, they are still among you, and there are consequences for what happened. I think that's a pretty cool premise to start on, and gives me a lot of imagination if I were trying to run a game like that, before the source book's even out. I don't think that Kickstarter's delivered yet because it hasn't showed up in my mail. And another thing you may want to look at is just there are a lot of people doing a lot of work kind of excavating kind of what the West was really like. A lot of people don't know that the Lone Ranger myth was really based on a black guy named Bass Reeves, who was a dead shot, who rode a horse named Goldie, and not Silver, and worked with the whites and worked with the Native Americans and First Nations people. So I think it sounds like maybe you want to play something a little more political, where kind of just killing people doesn't resolve problems. And I think if you put enough energy into it, you guys can have a really good game. And you have the opportunity on the horizon that some great resources are coming out.
Yeah, another one, because I've played a good amount of Deadlands, right, over the years, is they made an alternate history, right, which did things. Now, interestingly, they still had problems with it, and in 2019, Shane Hensley, who created Savage Worlds and Deadlands, went back and retconned the Confederacy in their game world, so the Confederacy lost the war and is no longer a playable faction. So that was part of their history, and and he wrote the game a long time ago, and now is hopefully we've been evolving as people, right? He made the decision that he's going to ditch the CSA, and that he made it very clear, that was his decision alone, right? And I love the fact that when he talked to people about it, he told them, he's like, I want to just avoid the discussion of why I did it. And, I was like, first of all, it's my game and my world, so I can do it. But he's like, but I have a master's degree in political science and military history. I've read dozens of books, this is his jam, right? And he's like, I've written historical miniatures rules. I was raised in Ohio and Virginia. He's basically laying down, this is who I am a part of, and it's not okay.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think, not saying I love certain things about the Old West. I love certain tropes of it, but I don't love all of what it was. Creating your own version of that, which then can address those things, and talking to, and can be a great part of that, right? It's always a conversation too, telling your players, here's why my world is different.
Yeah. Because
I don't want to represent those things here, right? And I think we see that a lot in even fantasy games, right? Where people are like, yes, there's no gender division. It doesn't matter. Anybody can be anything. Or even now, if you're on Twitter, Super Dylan put this amazing rule set together to have wheelchairs in D&D, and oh my God, the furor that sparked off. Or people are like, well, you would never be able to have a wheelchair. And I'm just like, oh, right, but my Manticore riding orc is perfectly fine. But someone in a wheelchair, that's just nuts, right? So, it's all about accessibility and inclusion and looking at where the problems were and just being upfront and addressing them. I've wanted to write an Old West basically I want to use like the Traveler rule set to make characters and stuff, but do an Old West setting and have some Mystic stuff in there, whatever it was, and not Deadlands or something else. And it was the first thing I started thinking of. I'm like, oh, I really love this setting, and like it's so problematic. So, more than anything, Kurt, good on you for recognizing that it's a problem and trying to figure out how to deal with it, as opposed to like, oh, well, I guess this is how things were, so that's what we're gonna do. Because that's we don't need to do that.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think what the game I ran. I think it was at the. Oh shoot! What was the name of that game? The Big Blue Monkeys from Outer Space. I came up. Oh, Vast Dominions. The Vast Dominions setting.
Oh. The game you wrote.
Yeah. But I mean, in that one, we had a discussion about whether or not, because in the rules, there's factions of troublemakers, and one of them is the women's suffrage movement. Obviously, troublemakers is in quotes, as in facetious.
Yeah, yeah.
But we had a discussion before the game started. Do we want to make that a part of this game, or do we want to just not have that in the game? And the consensus was to not have it in the game at all.
Yeah. But I played a game. I did a test of that where I like really was interested in playing that. Like the upstart suffragette who like was like making shit, like, setting shit on fire and making a change. So it's interesting because like there are some things like that, and I think the women's suffrage movement is a kind of a pristine example, because while there was like really terrible shit that went down, like it was not necessarily to the level of many other things that you can handle really badly in the Wild West, especially the treatment of Asian and Black people and the indigenous people. Like, genocide is different than not letting people vote.
Yeah.
Hey, don't forget Mexico.
Exactly. Absolutely.
We stole a good 10% of Mexico.
Absolutely. Oh man, those borders bounced around. Yeah, they actually teach all that. That's like 4th grade California history, is like all of that. There's pretty much anybody besides white men suffered in the Wild West. So all the above. But so that's also something that you need to kind of keep in mind. If someone is of that group and is opting to kind of play out a power fantasy in a way, like that should be like, okay, but like really talk to them about where their comforts are, like have those lines and veils in place. And don't make that offer like in front of everybody. Like let them opt in rather than pursuing that and asking them. It's not one of those things like, do you want to be the persecuted angry woman? Well, no, when you phrase it that way, no, I do not. Thank you. But if you see it as an option, like, okay, like, hey, this sounds like cool. To definitely have that, you should not at least in my opinion, you should not let people of other groups try and play that. Like, I would have been very upset at the table, even with people that I knew and cared about. Like if Bill had been in that game and offered to be like, oh yeah, I'm going to be the upstart woman. I'm going to be the suffragette. Well, I'm sure it like would have funny elements to it. Like there would definitely be a part of me that, as much as I love and trust Bill, and like he's one of my best friends and all this stuff, like
nuh-uh.
Right. I'm using it as an example because it's something you would not do. Like that would be uncomfortable with that. And so you just need to be really clear about those lines starting out too.
And I think to that point, Kimmy, like when you're in any game, in any setting, right? When you know that there are things in there that are difficult like this, and somebody wants to lean into it, right? Like, no, I want to play that type of character, or I want to experience it. Like, you, as a GM, you also need to find out why.
Yeah.
That is, because we've all heard, or most of us have probably heard Tyler's story of running dead presidents at a con, and someone shows at the table who's like, oh, I can't wait to play this president because that president was super racist, and guess what? So am I.
Yeah.
And it was just like a nightmare for everybody. But like
that
was
Andrew
the whole reason
Jackson,
for wanting to play there,
wasn't
because
was it Andrew
now
Jackson?
his
I don't
racism
remember.
was going to be validated.
Yeah.
Was it Andrew Jackson? I don't remember which president that was.
Andrew Jackson, yeah.
Yeah, it was.
I think it was.
Kind of
Very
all
nice
of the
guy.
above, like most of them. Like,
Yeah, Andrew Jackson really leaned in.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. RPGM Sean in the chat was saying, what about placing a Wild West theme setting on a non-Earth environment where there are where the real world dark history didn't occur? That can be done. I think you need to be really explicit about that. Again, it still takes like handling it carefully. And it's like things like Firefly. Yeah, but you have to remember that like then there's a whole bunch of other stuff involved in that. So you kind of have to like deal with that. If you want to have like pristine like Star Trek where like nobody did anything wrong and we just colonized this planet and everybody's always been happy, cool. Like that's absolutely a thing. And yeah, just plan it ahead with your group, because I mean, if you're using Firefly as an example, that's like the generation ships and a bunch of stuff, and not even going into the Joss Whedon stuff, but like kind of the appropriation of a lot of Chinese culture and language and things like that. Yeah, there's a lot there to handle. So just kind of again be careful what you're stealing from, like referring to our first email. And just making sure that you're like really thoughtful about it and really thinking about the whole picture with it.
All right. Anything else on this, or are we going to close it out? Going once, going twice?
Wild Wild West, the TV show, is the mix of all of this.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great sci-fi show with the Old West wrapper.
It is.
So good.
Not the movie. Not the movie.
Oh, no. Although I did like the giant spider
thing. The Wild Wild West. Sorry.
I did like the giant spiders.
So Kimmy, Wild West was a TV show before it was a movie. I don't know if you know.
I gathered that a minute ago. I was going to play cool, like I'd always known it.
Yeah, it was actually cool.
I thought it was just a movie that had Will Smith.
That was Robert Conrad.
And James Gardner.
That's right.
Yeah, Robert Conrad was James West.
Oh, was it Robert? And who?
And it was no, it wasn't. Artemis Gordon was.
You're thinking of Maverick.
Maverick was that. Yeah.
That's another TV show.
Artemis Gordon was played by Ross Martin.
Got it.
And he was sort of the king of
Man of a thousand faces.
He was like a spy master.
It was Mission Impossible in the West.
It was.
Yeah.
It totally was. They had like a super secret train they drove around on and had all kinds of gizmos and yeah.
Cool.
All right.
Great villains. Good stuff.
It was campy. It was fun.
The best part about that, and this is a great RPG thing too, is that it both solved they're going to travel all over the place and have different settings, but they had a killer home base. And it's one of the most unique ones, I think, in like that's my kid in the background if you hear that.
Somebody's pot spoiling.
He's like, it's 8:07 at night and I'm still awake.
It's like, I think my dog's found a baby.
Yeah, what's going on. Yeah, your dogs are like but their home base was awesome because it was this like really luxurious train car that was just theirs, and so they could go anywhere like with the train where the train could go, but they had all kinds of cool gadgets in it.
Yeah, it had like a lab in it.
And but it was like their mobile base that was just super swank. And I always thought that was such a cool idea.
They had a team of people that were like making weapons for them and everything, and it all was like in this like train cars.
Wasn't it a caboose? Was it a caboose?
I think it was.
Hey now.
I think it was a caboose. Because they had a different shape, didn't it?
I thought there was more than one car. I seem to remember there was like the big luxurious car that like I remember they would have their meetings in, and then there was
I'm looking it up.
It's very important. Hold the end of the show. We have to know.
It was the equivalent of Michael Knight's truck,
Oh no,
James Bond, it's one of his gizmo cars or something.
It's got
He's right, it was a mobile base.
It's got the whistle stop balcony off the back. Other than that, it just looks like a regular train car.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. All right, I'm gonna hit the music. Thank you for joining us for season 28, episode 6 of Happy Jack's RPG Podcast. My name is Stu.
My name is Kimmy.
I'm Bill. I'll be Bill. I'm Bill.
I'm still Mo.
Stork.
And we'll see you next week, 7 p.m. Pacific time, happyjacks.org/live, or listen-live, apparently, is where it goes now. Thank you.
List dash live is fine.
/live, not dash live.
/live, yeah, not
/live.
Look what you did.
And goodbye. We'll be there.
Bye.
And
Yeah.
have a good day.
Bye.
We're all fine here. How are you?
How are you?
The preceding program has been a presentation of the Angry Folk Media Empire.